Hello, everyone, and welcome to part one of my dramatic reading of Witch on the Holy Night. Witch on the Holy Night is a visual novel by Kinoko Nasu, made by Type Moon, that seems to take place in the same continuity-ish of Tsukihime and, sort of adjacent but not really to the Fate verse. It was recently released with a US translation earlier this week, and we are going to be doing a dramatic reading, which means if there is any voice acting, it will be turned off, and I will be doing all of the voices as usual. So, without further ado, let us begin Witch on the Holy Night. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, usually episode 1 of all my stuff, there's a myriad of technical issues, and then we just kind of go as it goes on, and then it's fine. So hopefully things go smoothly, but they never do, so. It was a winter's day 8 years prior when it happened. That solemn morning when she understood the value of life for the very first time. Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories, both frustrating and halcyon. That was only during summer, though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station, after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up, and the iced-over windows to clear. "Mind starting up the car for me?" Her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with an icy breath, until she reached that old sedan. As always, she inserted the key, then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she'd done so many times before. Just a second. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was the cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. Ugh. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts, and surely died instantly. The other kitten, with its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother's, or rather, the chunk of meat that was its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster. Poor things. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine, and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. "It's okay. It wasn't your fault." Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. "I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten." Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. Wait! She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains, to her grandmother's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandmother's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales. But so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help. I suppose you want me to alter this kitten's fate? The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. This kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish, like a machine. Boo! Oh no, the girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky. We were too late. Some things cannot be undone. Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known. It was all as if it never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return. Is somebody there? That day. It was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed. Whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Arrogant, greedy, and only able to destroy. I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets. There's no holding back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. Lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, But today, classes were cancelled in commemoration for the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination, but having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shut the curtains. Then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her. I'd like a nice, uneventful dream for 2 hours, thank you. Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, out of habit, her eyes popped open. Oh, come on. Why today of all days? The telephone was situated on the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight this urge. Why doesn't Alice answer it? She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little hilltop academy. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder. I'm trying to sleep here. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room. God, it's cold. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated through the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house. Well, it is a haunted house, I suppose. It's too large for just the two of us. She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands, or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto the gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible. though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale. For whether it be objectively true, or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Anime opening? No? Okay. Oh, maybe. Yep, a little bit. An opening, anyway. The environments are gorgeous. Enough to not need a ufotable opening. I mean, they were confident enough to just kind of shadow release it, so yeah, I guess it must be good, right? It's a nice change of pace to have, like, some semblance of a third-person narration. So that's kind of interesting. Pretty much everything that I've read thus far is either not narrated at all or narrated by the main character. Yeah. Wow. That's next to Tsukihime. I will tell you that Digimon Survive looks gorgeous. I think that's one of the best looking, definitely, like top 5. But yeah, the background art looks very similar to Tsukihime, like in terms of like its sharpness. The rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing a peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon. Not that it has anything to do with me, though. The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. she didn't encounter any other students along the way. Nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk to the faculty room simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all of its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed toward the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim-framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable, yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image this mid-20s man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet. "Mr. Yamashiro?" She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response for the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head. "Hey there. Good morning, Miss Aozaki. I guess this means you got the call." "Yes, they called me at home about an hour ago, out of the blue." Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. Just a second. Okay. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about, and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere, like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure, not a buddy to joke around and pal around with. He was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner toward him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk. "You're in a foul mood today?" "Today? I'm like this every day." The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial. "If you say so. Just go easy on our guest, okay? To be honest, we're not completely sure how to deal with him yet." "About that, do you want to tell me what the hell is going on? Because I have no clue." As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone, and slowly put out his cigarette. "Let's start at the beginning. What did they tell you over the phone?" "Just that I'd be introduced to a transfer student. They were a little hazy on the rest, though." One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically. "If this was all a joke to you..." Oh, I'm sorry, other way around. "If this is all a joke to you, perhaps I should just go home." Wait, I didn't mean to laugh. This isn't a practical joke. We could really use your help." "So there really is a transfer student?" "Yes, but he is... how should I put it? Difficult circumstances. His name... oh, that was weird. Usually when you do continuing quotations, you don't put the quotation at the end. You leave it off, and then the next paragraph break has another quotation, and then when the quotation ends, then you put the quotation at the end. But they did it like completely backwards here. That's super weird. I wonder why they did that. Anyway, his name is Sojiro, and he's a bit, well, peculiar. So we thought someone around the same age would be best suited to show him the ropes. She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems, or was difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant. You don't hear a teacher call someone that every day. She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home. I have a question. Yes? Oh, he's a second-year student like you. He's well-behaved and a good listener. He's not the most energetic individual, but that just means he'll be easier to get along with, right? He's not in the same homeroom class as you, but I'm sure you'll get along just... I'll be the judge of that when I actually meet him. And none of that answered my question. Why me? Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something that she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her over the past year. I'll ask you one more time, Mr. Yamashiro. Why does it have to be me? Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered. Well, about that. You're probably thinking it's because you're the iron-fisted ruler of the student council, and are willing to strike down both teacher and student for the good of the school. But you'd be wrong. I can't imagine any other reason you'd call me. Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of quality. I mean, I'd handle this myself if it was just about pure obligation. But who gets this job has nothing to do with whether or not they're a teacher or in the student council. I just felt that you were the only one who could entertain this kind of request without needing to weigh all sides. That's why I insisted it be you. In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no. Mr. Yamashiro? Oh dear. Would you stop glaring at me like that already? At least put on a smile for your new schoolmate. Look, if you're agreeing to help, we should go see him. We've already kept him waiting long enough as it is. And because you braved the rain to get here, I'd be happy to give you a ride home. Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good. Thanks, she replied, before turning and walking out of the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought into this room and asked to wait. Even the best-behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never even seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him, it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it, barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but by the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety of the city the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out of this moment. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on the way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him. What a miserable level of isolation. How is this even possible in post-war Japan? He's like Robinson Crusoe. She had every right to be angry. I guess. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villagers in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan Rail... Oh, I see. That's really weirdly written. Although expressways and Japan Rail, the old national railways, now spanned the country like arteries, sorry. It wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like this to exist. Still no idea who Robinson Crusoe is. We'll Google it at the end, if I remember. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live. When you say no electricity, you mean in general, right? Like, he must have had access to a public phone. Apparently not. He mentioned how shocked he was by the phones when he started living here. I kid you not. He said, "Wow, telephones are so useful." Couldn't really deny that, could I? She shot a sidelong glare his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivete of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit. They probably didn't have police officers either. My family home is up in the mountains, so it's not inconceivable they wouldn't have electricity. But he doesn't even know what school is? Nope, never heard of them. But this is apparently his first time visiting one. Maybe that's why he's nervous. He wasn't very talkative. He's almost, what would you call it, feral? Like a boy raised by wolves. I suppose that makes us Lewis and Clark. Be funny if she was just like, shut the fuck up. I don't know. Hey, you're scaring me, Aozaki. I was joking. Go easy, okay? And don't worry. I got the feeling from talking to him that he's a nice kid. He was almost like, I don't know, a cute little animal that doesn't speak human. Your jokes and metaphors aren't helping. She gave her a blunt reply. He tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like. But the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed. But her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering into the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of the meeting with the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle. Aozaki, I believe you and all, but I'll say it again. Be nice, okay? Can you at least try to smile?
I'm bad at faking smiles, but I'll do my best.
Really? Well, that's a relief. I really mean it. It's good to know that you're not good at everything. Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated. I already know I'm not the friendliest looking person in the world, but I can't just make myself smile at the drop of a hat. You should have asked Tobimaru if that's what you were after. She sighed about her social shortcomings. But then it occurred to her that being called to school on a day off, while sleep deprived, wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but it was neither her duty nor obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized this on a normal school day, another complaint she wanted to voice later.
I hate him already. He's my sworn enemy, and I haven't even met him. Sorry, but I couldn't care less about his extenuating circumstances. You think this isn't awkward for me, too? Honestly, why did this have to happen when I'm so busy?
Her pounding headache from lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see this from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little while, you don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting. It must be 9 o'clock already. Yeah, that seems about right. He'd been vaguely keeping track of time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching. Finally, I thought they'd forgotten about me. He could hear 2 sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult.
He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open. So sorry to keep you waiting. The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought me here. Hey, where's Mr. Satonaka? I told him to keep you company. He shouldn't have left you here. Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then, from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This is how it felt when time stood still. She blinked quickly a few times as if taken aback. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes widened slightly, as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feeling into words was a different matter altogether, so we'll never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny. Wait, the streamer, the game, or the concept? Allow me to introduce the two of you. This is the transfer student I mentioned, Sojiro Shizuki. And this is the girl that will be showing you around. She's our student council president, and came here on her day off just to welcome you. Her name is Aoko Aozaki. I don't like that they switch the names around. I know that's like an official thing that official translations typically do. And I don't like it. I'm so used to all the fan translations doing it like the normal way. Oh well. His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. I feel bad for Sojiro. He's like, what the fuck's going on right now? You guys okay? Just staring at each other. It's weird. Stop. You're 17. Stop. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. This was the setting the three of them had found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wild flowers. All right. In spite of his perfect posture, he seemed subdued and frail. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. A soy boy, if you will. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. Ooh, he's got some bandages there. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him more of a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home with the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt herself raising her natural defenses. Let me just... There we go. What's with me? Am I really this angry for no reason? She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side. Aozaki, why don't you introduce yourself? Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating. Introduce myself, huh? After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare-down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled toward the innocent boy and skewered him. Again, sorry for the wait, Shizuki. Hearing his name, Sojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him. I'll do the introductions then. This is the transfer student, Sojiro Shizuki.
And this is our student council president, who came on her day off, just to show you around. Her name is Aoko Aozaki. Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare, an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed, mistakenly, that this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. Well, he thought he'd made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out. She was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would become a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card can bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued. When does a Joker card bring disaster? Wow, you two seem to have really hit it off. I suppose I can leave you to it then. Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept toward the door. I'll be in the faculty room. Stop by when you're finished. You'll be all right, won't you, Aozaki? You're the student council president. Don't let me down. Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state. One in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was a naive boy and a cross-armed, guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over their first moves, though ultimately it was only Aoko that had considered the scene that carefully. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojiro. Whatever. It's not like this is the first time that Mr. Yamashiro landed me in it. So, what's your name again? Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself. I'm Sojiro Shizuki, he replied.
And you're Miss Aozaki, right? For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response. Drop the miss. That's not my style. Is Shizuki fine? What do you mean? What do you mean, what do I mean? Hello? Did I say something weird? Yeah, very. The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself. Never mind. That must be normal here. You can call me Shizuki. Do you mind if I call you Aozaki? Suit yourself. She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and it was her personal policy to see it through to the end. Sorry, but I'm not in the mood for pleasantries. Time is short, so let's get this over with. Sure. I know your time is valuable. Aoko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than the cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again. First things first. Did you understand everything Mr. Yamashiro explained to you? Sorry, I kind of chewed through that, sorry. Yes, I get how the school works. But it's still a bit hard to imagine that everyone around here is the same age. Everyone here is around the same age, sorry, I fucked that up. I see. Great. Aoko rubbed her forehead. This Sojiro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently, all he'd heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people meet to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass the transfer exam after all. Barely. Not my problem. Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time, or at least, she'd try to keep it that way. Aozaki? He asked, calmly trying to get her attention. What? Can I ask you something? Yes, what is it? I could be wrong about this, but you seem upset about something. You're not a morning person, are you? His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her try that again. Jesus. His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her if she remembered to eat breakfast. It was like another hammer to her head. It was true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring hot red daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark, "Most people can't handle your scowl, Aoko. It wouldn't hurt you to be a little more tolerant." She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be that he couldn't pick up on this? He's not making fun of me, is he? No, he couldn't be. Huh? Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. Thanks for the like, whoever clicked like. It began to dawn on Aoko, far too late, that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet. Look, let me spell it out for you, because you're just not getting it. It's not your imagination. I am angry, and anyone could see that in my eyes. It's easier than trying to make conversation. In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together. That makes sense. I don't know why you'd want to do it that way, but I get that it's a faster way to express yourself. Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kinds of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks. So it's true. He really is peculiar. Mr. Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond naivete. Naivety? Sorry. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him some jet lag-induced confusion. Let's visit your classroom. She had regained her composure. Sojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks. Just one more thing. Aoko waited for Sojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness. I wanted to ask, why are you so angry? Is it your line of business? Or does it run in your family? A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. he meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check. It's not you, if that's what you're worried about. I'd just rather be somewhere else right now. With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Sojiro Shizuki. While what constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. If he was a bitch, he'd be basic. Sorry. And Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off of her. Aoko showed him to his homeroom, Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor. Oh dear. Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned. I guess he said that, sorry. It's 20-1 already. Huh? You're kidding, right? The school isn't that big. We'll be done soon. The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long. Maybe if you didn't ask so many questions, we'd be done by now. It's a miracle it's still light out. Aoko glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. Is he... To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection. Oops, I think I broke him. The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily, at least, until her irritation returned in full force. What's the hurry? Don't tell me your brain's not big enough to remember all this stuff. Well, there's that. But it's more about it almost being 1 o'clock. Sojiro's gaze wandered as if worried about something.
If he was worried about the weather, he would have had a hard time seeing it, as there were no windows in this hallway.
Don't tell me you've got somewhere to be.
Is this a quote or a thought?
That's perfect. I take time out of my day for you, and you don't have the decency to even hang around. You're a real piece of work, you know that?
Thanks, I guess. Nice of you to say.
Not a compliment!
She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
Well,
what?
what's happening in 20 minutes?
Sojiro's face lit up, as he finally understood what she was asking him.
It's a secret.
He said with a perfectly straight face.
Every time I think I get this guy figured out, he finds a way to trip me up.
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
You want to repeat that, Shizuki?
She took a step forward. Like I said, it's a secret. Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojiro took a step back. And another. And another. No matter how many steps back he took, she kept edging toward him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
Last question. Do you enjoy mocking me?
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face. Let me explain. His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance, and freed her face from that unseemly smile. The truth is that my part-time job shift starts at 1. But students aren't allowed to have jobs, right?
Yeah. Wait. Were you being tight-lipped because you thought you'd get in trouble? All you have to do is get permission, dweeb.
I know, and I did. I got permission when they accepted me to the school.
Really?
Aoko's face lit up as she realized he may not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet. But I only got permission for one of my jobs.
Wait, you have more than one job?
Well, I quit 2 of them. Living expenses are bad enough, but now I have to earn money for school as well. Don't you think it's unreasonable for them to only let me work 1 job?
No, I think you're the one who's being unreasonable.
Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own.
She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last thing she'd ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth. Well, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. It's fine. You can go. I get it. Will you be okay? She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate, which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd be just as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else. I'll be fine. I'll just head home. First, though, she thought it best they both stop by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had something that the transfer procedures... Excuse me, let me try that again. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties. I finished showing him around. Great job. That goes for you too, Shizuki. What did you think of our school? Thank you for the tour. It's like a real school. Oh, that's great to hear. Okay then. Best of luck starting tomorrow. She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting. You'll have to forgive Mr. Yamashiro. He likes the faculty room so much he chooses to kick back while getting his students to do the dirty work for him. I bet he spends hours in there. Actually, it's pretty smart of him. Okay, Aozaki. If you're fine with it, then so am I. Huh? There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Aoko had no idea. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna get going. Thanks again for today. Yes, today. Today only. She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile, as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile. See you later. Huh? And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned to the next class over. Did he just... Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom's windows. Whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window she really wished she hadn't. Oh, I see how it's... That's really fucking shittily written. No! Stop! 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 He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him. What do you think you're doing?
What am I doing? I'm leaving for my job, that's what.
You know that this window isn't an exit, don't you? I mean, do you even know what floor you're on?
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes. Oh my god, I almost died. Who would put an exit here? This is dangerous.
It's the lack of something between your ears that's dangerous.
Her insult went right over his head. Give me just a second. Okay, sorry about that.
People here don't normally enter and exit through windows, okay? You should probably remember this information for future reference.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to save some time. But thanks. I'll be more careful from now on. He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
Hey, be my guest. Go outside any way you like. Just don't do it in front of me from now on. Anyway, you start school tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous though, which is why I came in early for the tour. He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
I wonder if he's really going to be okay here.
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head, in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she just had.
Whatever. It's not as if I'll see him again.
The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was almost impossible to discern whether or not it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock. He was right about the time. She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason, affected her far more than she wished. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin this day let me try that again. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would be ultimately far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could toward the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
Well, I suppose it could be worse.
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked the rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with that umbrella that she made her way toward Misaki Station. Yeah, I'm sorry about the lag. I'll fix that next time we do this. I'm sure I could just fiddle with the settings or something. The private Misaki school got its name from the town of the same name. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
I agree in principle to preserving the land, but not at the expense of our prosperity.
With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for new urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality in Misaki City in... Oh, hold on, let me try that again. And the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of the neighboring Yashirogi, nor the elegance of Misaki Hills.
What did people expect? To keep the town hidden atop a mountain forever? It's not like they were going to flatten the mountain or something.
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki, where the citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population, with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up on the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was remote, steep, and and also, oh, fuck me, dude. The path to the old grounds was remote, steep, and also well trodden by animals. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days enjoying live music on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company, on what should have been a day off. Looking back on it now, it's like my whole life has been one disaster after another. Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air. I couldn't see the quotation marks on the concrete, sorry.
Oh well, at least it's not boring.
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Kind of like Shenmue, actually. Well, this is either a traffic stop or a Sugar Ray song. Misaki's train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. That is some gorgeous looking background art, goddamn. Unique fashion clothes! It's my favorite kind of fashion clothes. When the department stores first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time, the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today,
so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. She looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have sworn she'd seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. It must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill was experiencing... The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at that point. This point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left was the sounds of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that had still lingered. Even mosquitoes have the grace to buzz off eventually, she grumbled under her breath. Whether good or bad, this too shall pass. So the saying goes. Yeah, got enough on my plate as it is. Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. But one last battle remained. Dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer. Do I have to wear this? His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was. I know how you feel, man. I feel the same. Unfortunately, it's the boss's orders, so you'll have to suck it up, okay? The future of this shopping arcade is at stake, apparently. I really hate to ask, but the rain stopped, so would you mind going out for me? Get back in one piece and I'll buy you dinner. His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. 10 years ago, Misaki City was the town of farm and woodland. But everything has changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiroi-Nuzuka was the only place in the city that had still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiroi-Nuzuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention, and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground in development that so enthralled them. Well, that's not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Aoko Aozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it. But unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that had made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that. I'd cycle home if it wasn't for this rain. Even a bus route would be a fine thing. Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier. Oh, it's locked? I guess Alice isn't back yet. With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open, as if to welcome her home. There sits atop a hill a haunted house. I promise I hit the button. It's just taking a long time to load. That's how the story much shared around the town used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night.
An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Aoko wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was that of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. Oh, it's like getting worse. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood, on top of a hill no one dared to approach. Like a ruin, shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house. Come on. Was the Kuonji mansion. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. The unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Aozaki resided for reasons unknown. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Kuonji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms, and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high, iron fence covered in... Oh, let me try that again. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. Jesus Christ. Given such extravagance, there was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of a hill was cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living there. Gosh. Well, I know I'm not one, but Alice... She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Wrong story for vampires. I mean, I don't know that. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. thought he said he wasn't haunted. Golly. This is, Alright. Have I unlocked the title screen? Okay, there we go. Alright, so we're gonna stop here. Like I said at the beginning, episode 1 of anything that I do is always gonna be riddled with technical difficulties. Although a lot of it's my fault this time. I really should have tested this. Like, I just didn't have the time because I've been so busy because of the holidays. So yeah. The translation is interesting. It's well written in terms of prose, but it's just kind of like there's a couple weird hiccups here and there. And like obviously they're kind of westernizing it a little bit. You know, there's no Aoko-san, there's no like Yamashiro Sensei, and you know, whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, the story seems pretty fun so far. Not too much happened, but it's a slow burn. That's fine. We will do this again on Thursday, probably around the same time. And for a little while at least, I'm going to be streaming on YouTube from now on. I have a Twitch channel, for those of you who don't know, on twitch.tv/BerserkChip, BerserkChip with 2 Ps. But there was a recent weird scandal involving Twitch that really rubbed me the wrong way. They have charities that you can donate to or do fundraisers for directly built into the Twitch website. And one of the charities that they have registered on there is a organization called LGB Alliance, which already, if you're excluding the T, like, there should be kind of like, that should clue you in that there's a fucking problem there. But on the Twitch website, when you click on LGB Alliance, there's like a short description, and there's literally anti-trans rhetoric on their description, where it's like something along the lines of, you know, they're fighting against the idea that gender and sex are separate or something, where it's like, what does that have to do with charity even? And like, it's the kind of thing where it's so negligent that the fact that Twitch looked at that and it was just like, yeah, okay, go for it, is so pathetic. It's so gross. So I'm already annoyed because they've never helped me out with my channel situation, because I do have a Twitch channel called BerserkChip with 1 P that I made when basically when Twitch first came out, and I've lost the password. I have no fucking clue what the password is, so I ended up having to change it to BerserkChip with 2 Ps. This wasn't a problem when I was just commenting in live streams, but when I started live streaming myself, it gets kind of obnoxious that I have to keep explaining that my Twitch channel has 1 extra P. I was thinking of changing it to BerserkChip Live, because it won't let me change it back to just 1 P because the other one already exists. And I've tried writing to them multiple times. I've tried getting access to that account, and they won't help me. They won't answer me. Not even like an automated, like, sorry, we can't do anything. It's the only big website that I've ever had an issue with that have contacted, that they haven't at least had the decency to respond, right? I've had stuff like that happen with Tumblr, YouTube, Twitter. They'll at least give you an automated response, and usually at some point they'll give you like a response. But nah, Twitch doesn't give a fuck. They couldn't give less of a fuck. It's so gross. And they have no excuse because they're literally bought out by one of the biggest, most richest corporations on the planet. So they have no excuse for this. It's absolutely disgusting. So for a little while at least, I don't feel like using Twitch just at all. Nobody I like streams on there anyway, except for like some FGC peeps, obviously. But yeah, so we're probably going to be sticking to YouTube for now. So I'm not going to be plugging my Twitch. So I'll be streaming on YouTube. The VOD for this is probably going to disappear in a couple hours as I download it, curate it, and then re-upload it as like an official VOD. Or as like a more cleaned up VOD. And that's just kind of what I'll be doing for a little while as we do this strange transfer. If Twitch makes a response to the LGBT Alliance thing and removes them, maybe I'll come back. Then if I find success on here, then fuck Twitch, because for my first stream on here, I had up to 5 viewers. That's pretty decent. If I could build some shit out here, that'd be great. So anyway, thank you everyone for watching. If you're watching the VOD, thank you for making it this far. Thank you, Inu, as always, for being in the chat. Missed you. Thank you for coming back. We will be back on Thursday, and we will be continuing with Witch on the Holy Night, and we will also be doing more Tsukihime. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time.